My parents cut me out of the will because I married a woman they didn't like, then came begging when I made millions. It sounds like the tagline of a trashy reality show, right? Something you'd scroll past on late-night TV. But for me, it was my life, and not a single part of it felt entertaining. I grew up in what people from the outside would call the perfect family. My father, Robert, owned a successful construction business in Georgia, specializing in upscale developments. My mother, Caroline, was the quintessential Southern hostess. Pearls, brunches, a garden club membership, and a passive-aggressive tone that could kill your self-esteem in under 60 seconds. We lived in a pristine colonial-style house in one of those gated communities where all the mailboxes match, and you're expected to wave at your neighbors even if you hate them. From a young age, I was told I'd inherit the business, not because I wanted to, but because that was the plan. Ivy League education, then back home to continue the legacy. I followed the script at first: Princeton undergrad, MIT master's in computer engineering, suit, tie, clean cut, respectable, acceptable. Then I met Lily. She was speaking at a tech conference in Atlanta. I remember walking in late thinking I'd quietly sit through yet another panel about venture capital and AI applications, but she walked onto that stage and everything shifted. She didn't lecture, she told a story about growing up in a low-income neighborhood in Chicago, teaching herself to code on a second-hand laptop, and eventually founding her own tech consultancy. Her voice was firm, her jokes were sharp, and when the crowd laughed, they laughed because they felt her, not because they were being polite. I introduced myself afterward. I stumbled over my words, which was new for me, and she smiled in a way that made my ears go hot. She was wearing a mustard yellow blazer and red lipstick. She looked like someone who knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone's approval. By the time we were on our third coffee date, I knew I was done for. The first time I told my parents about her, I got a polite from my mother and a grunted interesting from my father. When they met her, the tone changed. They had invited us over for dinner: steak, salad, red wine in glasses the size of goldfish bowls. Lily wore a modest navy dress. She even brought flowers. She smiled, asked about their lives, complimented the house. She was, as always, warm and intelligent and completely herself. But I could see it in my mother's eyes. This was not the girl she had pictured. Not the blonde debutante from a good family. Not the type she'd imagined in our Christmas cards. Over dessert, my father asked Lily where she went to school. University of Illinois, she said proudly. Then later, online certifications. I kind of built my own program. He blinked. So, not an Ivy? No, she said, unfazed. But it worked. My mother sipped her wine. How unconventional. I tried to change the subject, but it only got worse. Tell me, my mother continued, swirling her glass, do your parents still live in Chicago? They do, Lily said. South Side. Ah, she said, as if that explained everything. That night, after we left, I was quiet. Lily didn't ask. She knew. The next dinner came 3 weeks later. It was supposed to be just us, my parents and me, but I brought Lily anyway. I wasn't going to start hiding her. My father was already annoyed when we walked in. He barely looked at her when he shook her hand. Dinner was stiff. My mother picked at her food like it offended her. She asked Lily about her business, then interrupted her mid-answer to ask if she cooked. No, Lily said with a polite smile. Not much. Andrew usually cooks. He's better at it. My mother gave a tight smile. That's modern of you. Then came the moment I'll never forget. We were still sitting at the table. The plates were cleared, but no one had touched dessert. My father put his glass down with a thud. We need to talk, son, he said. Alone. No, I said. Say whatever you need to say. We're not hiding things. He glanced at my mother. She gave him a small nod. You're making a mistake, he said, looking me straight in the eye. This, all of this, it's going to cost you. Cost me what? I asked, already knowing. We've talked to the lawyer, my mother said softly. If you move forward with this relationship, if you marry her, we'll be making some changes to the estate. Changes, I repeated. You won't be in the will, my father said bluntly. We're not supporting this. Not financially, not socially. You'll be on your own. The silence in the room felt like it could crush me. Lily didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I looked at them both, sitting at their long mahogany table in their perfect little home, sipping judgment like it was Chardonnay. And then I said, "That's your choice. And this is mine." We left before dessert. When we moved into our first apartment together, it smelled like old paint and distant curry. The ceilings were low, the floor creaked in every room, and the heating hissed like it had asthma. But it was ours. We didn't have furniture, not really. Just a mattress on the floor, a coffee table someone left in the alley, and 2 foldable chairs we found on Craigslist. The Wi-Fi barely worked unless you sat directly under the router and whispered sweet nothings to it. But I'd never felt more grounded. We were both working freelance contracts. I coded boring back-end systems for startups that couldn't afford to hire in-house, and Lily had just left her job in a sleek downtown marketing agency. Everyone thought she was crazy for quitting. She had an executive title, a corner office, and invitations to all the right networking events. But she told me one night, while we sat cross-legged on the floor sharing Chinese takeout, "I'm done building other people's dreams. It's time to build mine." I watched her work like a woman on fire. She turned our living room into a war zone of sticky notes, wireframes, whiteboards, and coffee cups. She pitched investors from our couch. She taught herself product design. I handled the tech stack in my spare hours, and when the prototype finally launched, a marketplace app for small business consulting, we thought we were on our way. We weren't. The app flopped. We had underestimated our target audience, overestimated the market, and ran out of funds faster than we could pivot. The silence from users was deafening. A few polite clicks, no conversions, zero traction. We sat there one night staring at the analytics dashboard like it might apologize. Lily rubbed her forehead and said quietly, "Well, that sucked." We'd poured everything into it. Savings, time, sleep, and now we were down to our last few $1,000s. That night, lying beside her, I whispered, "What if my parents were right?" Lily didn't turn to look at me. Instead, she said, "Then I'll prove them wrong, with you or without." It hurt, the way truth sometimes does. But I knew she didn't mean she'd leave me. She meant she wouldn't stop, not for anyone. And I realized then that the woman I married didn't need saving. She needed space to soar. The next morning, she had a new idea. "You remember when my cousin couldn't figure out the college admissions process?" she said, pouring cereal into chipped bowls. "What if there was a platform for educational support, like real human guidance for kids from underserved communities?" "You mean like counseling?" I asked. "Sort of, but virtual, scalable. A place where students could connect with real mentors, college students, career coaches, people who get them." It sounded wild and huge and kind of brilliant. We called it Bridge. I built the MVP over the course of 6 weeks using every spare minute I had. Lily cold emailed 100 teachers and mentors. 10 replied. 5 stayed. We got a tiny grant from a local innovation fund, $5,000, just enough to keep us afloat while we worked part-time gigs to survive. It wasn't glamorous. We ate canned soup and off-brand cereal. We fixed the leaking kitchen sink with duct tape. But every small win felt like a firework. 6 months in, a high school district in Atlanta agreed to try Bridge with 50 students. Then came a community college in North Carolina. Then one day, a Zoom call changed everything. The woman on the screen wore big glasses and a scarf that looked like a peacock exploded. She was the head of an education equity nonprofit. She had found our site through a blog post and wanted to partner. Lily pitched like her life depended on it. By the end of the call, the woman said, "I like you two. Let's talk numbers." We had our first 5-figure contract 2 weeks later. From there, things moved fast. We hired a small team: engineers, content designers, support reps. Bridge had expanded into career development, college prep, and mental health referrals. We launched mobile. We got our first 6-figure investment. Then a second. We fought over feature priorities, cried over server crashes, laughed until 2 a.m. over bad UI copy. We made mistakes, said sorry, kept going. We didn't talk about my parents. Not until the day I opened our financial dashboard and saw the milestone, $1,004 in revenue. I stared at the screen in silence. Lily came up behind me, reading over my shoulder. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she kissed my cheek and said, "You owe me pizza." We drove to the coffee shop where we first met. It looked the same. Chalkboard menu, college students hunched over laptops, the smell of espresso and ambition in the air. We didn't even try to get a real table. We grabbed our usual spot by the window and ordered 2 slices and iced coffees. She raised her glass. To a million. I smiled. To us, we clinked plastic cups. She added, grinning. And to your parents, wherever they are, eating their own regrets with a silver spoon. I laughed, but part of me winced, because I knew, deep down, they hadn't seen the last of us. It had been 2 years since I last heard from them. No birthday calls, no holiday cards, not even a passive-aggressive email from my mother reminding me that the door is always open, if you're ready to come to your senses. So when a cream-colored envelope arrived with my father's handwriting on it, formal, slanted, aggressive, even in cursive, I stared at it like it might explode. Lily opened it for me. She read it once, twice, then handed it over silently. Andrew, we hope you're well. We would like to talk. No pressure, just dinner. Your mother misses you. Dad. It was signed with just his first name, like we were business acquaintances, like none of the screaming had happened. Lily raised an eyebrow. I give it 2 courses before they ask for something. I half laughed. You think they'd wait that long? We didn't really talk about them. Not anymore. Our life had become its own force. The house in Midtown with too many bookshelves, 2 rescue dogs that barked at leaves, our growing team of 30 employees, the quiet rituals of love we'd created, late-night code reviews, wine-fueled strategy talks, grocery store debates over oat milk versus almond. Bridget had just passed its Series A funding. Lily had been profiled in Fast Company. I had gotten emails from recruiters trying to poach me for VP roles. We were building something real, something lasting, and now the ghosts of the past wanted to do dinner. We said yes, out of curiosity more than anything. The restaurant they picked was one of those upscale spots with muted lighting and waiters who whispered. We arrived 5 minutes early. They arrived 10 minutes late. I recognized them immediately, though they looked smaller somehow. My father wore an old suit I hadn't seen since my college graduation. His tie was slightly frayed. My mother's pearls were missing, replaced by a simple gold chain. She smiled too quickly, like it might break if she held it too long. Andrew, she said, reaching out like we'd just come back from vacation. And Lily, you both look, well. Lily smiled politely. We sat. The silence stretched. Menus opened and closed. Water was poured. My father didn't make eye contact for the first 10 minutes. My mother fiddled with her napkin like it had offended her. You've done well for yourself, she said eventually, with the strained tone of someone trying not to choke on the words. I saw the article. Very impressive, Lily thanked her, voice calm, unreadable. And you, my father said, gesturing vaguely toward Lily. You look, well, much better than before. More polished. Lily tilted her head. Moisturizer does wonders. The waiter arrived to take our orders. No one really looked at the menus. My father ordered the cheapest steak. My mother asked if the soup came in a smaller portion. It hit me then, a feeling, subtle but sharp. They weren't doing well. My father cleared his throat after the appetizers arrived, a tiny tower of tuna on some sort of foam. I'll just get to the point, he said, laying his fork down. I was let go from the company 6 months ago. Downsizing. New management. I blinked. You built that company? He gave a small shrug. That's business, my mother cut in. And I've been dealing with some health issues. It's nothing urgent, but the medical bills have been, well, substantial. Lily said nothing, just sipped her wine slowly. My father leaned forward, fingers laced. We thought, well, given how successful you've both been, perhaps it's time to revisit things. The past is the past. Families move forward. Heal. He paused, looked me directly in the eye for the first time that night. We were wondering if you'd be open to, I don't know, investing in something together, helping out, maybe even bringing us on as advisors to Bridge. In a way, it's part of the family legacy, isn't it? Lily let out the softest exhale, not quite a laugh. I stared at them, my parents, the people who had once told me I was throwing my future away, who cut me out of their lives because I refused to live by their image of perfection, who had looked at the woman I loved and seen nothing but a stain on their reputation. Now they wanted a stake, a seat, a piece of the thing they said would never work. I folded my napkin carefully and set it beside my plate. When I told you I was marrying Lily, I said slowly, you told me I was no longer part of the family. That was my mother began. No. Let me finish. My voice stayed calm but firm. You made a decision. You made it publicly and clearly. You erased me. And I accepted that. I glanced at Lily, who gave me a subtle nod. I don't hate you. I'm not angry anymore. But I also don't owe you anything. And bridged, that's ours. Built from the ground up with no help from anyone, especially not you. My father opened his mouth, closed it. My mother tried to smile again. We just thought maybe things could go back to the way they were. I shook my head gently. They can't. And honestly, they shouldn't. The silence that followed felt final. I stood up, placing my card on the table. Dinner's on me. Call it a celebration of boundaries. Lily stood beside me, calm and radiant. As we turned to leave, I added, You chose to cut me out of your will. That was your choice. This is mine. Respect it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The conversation with my parents kept looping in my head like a broken reel. Their faces, their voices, my own words, calm on the outside but shaking underneath. I kept thinking about the house I grew up in, the photos in the hallway, the sound of my mother's heels on the hardwood floor when she was angry, the way my father used to pat my shoulder like it was a performance review, the fact that no matter how much I did, I never seemed to be enough. I was 32 years old, the co-founder of a multi-million-dollar company, living in a house I bought with the woman I love. And yet a part of me still wanted to hear them say we're proud of you, and actually mean it. Lily found me sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. You're doing it again, she said softly. Doing what? Carrying them like bricks in your chest. I exhaled, my hands gripping my knees. I don't know. It shouldn't hurt, not anymore, but it does. She sat beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. You grew up with them. Of course it hurts. It would be strange if it didn't. I turned toward her. They're my parents, Lil. As awful as they've been, they're still part of me. I know, she said. And you can forgive them if that's what you want, but only for your own peace, not for theirs. And not because you owe them anything. She looked me dead in the eye. Don't confuse forgiveness with debt. I remembered something then. The night of that first dinner, after we walked out of the restaurant, I couldn't drive home right away. We sat in the car in silence, engine off, the weight of it all pressing down like fog. I remember gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together, and Lily reaching over, gently pulling one of my hands free, threading her fingers through mine. You don't have to prove anything, she said. Not to them, not anymore. Her voice was low, firm, like truth whispered in a storm. You don't owe anyone an explanation for who you love. I squeezed her hand so tightly it probably hurt, but she didn't let go. A few days later, I asked them to meet again. This time, it was at our place. Neutral ground didn't work. I needed them to see my world, not some menu with overpriced risotto. Lily set out tea and didn't say much. She wasn't cold, just watchful, like someone who'd learned the hard way when to speak and when to let silence do the heavy lifting. My parents sat across from us in our living room. My father's eyes drifted to the shelves lined with awards, photos of the team, snapshots of me and Lily in old cafes and on pitch stages. My mother stared at a framed picture of us holding our first $1 million revenue check, both of us wearing party hats and pizza grease on our fingers. I didn't waste time. I want to make something clear, I began. I'm not angry anymore, but I need honesty from now on, if there's going to be any relationship at all. They looked at each other. My mother pursed her lips. My father nodded, slowly, guardedly. I know things are hard for you. I'm not heartless, but I'm not giving you money. I'm not giving you equity. What I am offering is a path forward, if you want it. They said nothing. It's not about business, I continued. It's about respect, for me, and especially for Lily. At that, my mother bristled. Andrew. No, I said. Let me finish. You hurt her. You treated her like she wasn't good enough, when she was the one who saved me from becoming the version of myself you wanted. My father looked down. I took a breath. So here's the only way we go forward. You apologize to Lily. Not as a formality, not as a box to check, a real apology. And you stop seeing our success as something you're entitled to. My mother blinked like I'd slapped her. You want us to beg? I want you to be honest, to take responsibility. That's not humiliation, that's integrity. She scoffed. This is humiliating. No, I said quietly. It's human. Everyone makes mistakes. But pretending they didn't happen, that's what keeps people stuck. There was a long pause. No one said anything. Then Lily stood up. You can take your time, she said calmly. But if you want to know your son again, it starts with telling the truth. Otherwise, this is the last time we see each other. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She just walked upstairs, like she had better things to do than argue with ghosts. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Not from both of them. Just my father. Typed. Formal. It read more like a pitch deck than an apology. Andrew, given the emotional nature of recent events, I understand why you're hesitant. But I believe there's a strategic opportunity here. I've outlined a proposal for integrating Bridge with several education-adjacent ventures I've come across through old contacts. With the right structure, this could be mutually beneficial. There was no mention of Lily, no mention of the last conversation, just business. As if that was all we were now. I didn't respond. Some wounds don't need revenge. They just need closure. Some people don't need punishment. They just need space, so they don't keep taking parts of you. Lily found me reading the letter by the window. I didn't say a word, just handed it over. She skimmed it, laughed once, not cruelly, just sadly. You going to answer? No, I said. He's not talking to me. He's talking to who he wishes I still was. Lily slipped her arm around my waist. I'm glad you're not him, she whispered. And for the first time in weeks, I felt light again. 6 months passed. Time didn't heal everything, but it helped soften the sharp edges. Our lives had only grown fuller. The company was thriving. We'd hired 20 new people, opened a second office in Austin, and Lily had quietly begun working on something close to her heart. Something that had nothing to do with Bridget and everything to do with the girl she once was. A girl who'd built herself from scratch, alone. The announcement came on a rainy Tuesday. The Lily Ainsworth Foundation, a nonprofit fund for young entrepreneurs without family backing, was officially launching. We're not just writing checks, Lily had told the press. We're rewriting narratives. You don't have to come from money to matter. When I watched her stand at that podium, calm and radiant in a blazer she bought 5 years ago off a clearance rack, I felt something twist in my chest. Not pain, not pride exactly. Gratitude. Because this woman didn't just survive. She built something better. The letter came a week later, an actual letter. Not an email. Not a message passed through a cousin or mutual acquaintance. No investment pitch attached. No conditions. Just an envelope, handwritten. To Lily Ainsworth. Inside were 2 pages. The first written in my mother's unmistakably neat script. The second in shakier handwriting, my father's, though I hadn't seen it in years. They didn't ask for anything. There was no mention of money or regrets dressed as suggestions. They apologized. Not perfectly, not poetically, but sincerely. My mother wrote about not understanding what strength looked like in someone who wasn't shaped like us. She said Lily reminded her of her own mother, tough, proud, and never thanked enough. She said she was sorry for the words she'd said, and the ones she hadn't. She didn't beg. She didn't expect forgiveness. She just said she hoped Lily would keep doing what she was doing, that she was proud of what she'd built. My father's note was shorter. Just one line stood out. I see now that I was trying to preserve a version of my son that didn't belong to him anymore. Maybe never did. Lily read both pages slowly. Then again, when she handed them to me, her face was unreadable. Well, she said, that took longer than expected. I studied her expression. How do you feel? She shrugged, but it wasn't cold. I'm not someone who keeps score, she said, but I do remember every play. I smiled. So, it's not redemption, she said, folding the pages. But it's a start. I nodded. It didn't feel fake. Not this time. No, she agreed. It felt human. That weekend, we visited the new property. It was still mostly dirt and steel bones, but you could see it taking shape. The future HQ of the foundation would sit on 4 acres just outside the city, surrounded by trees and walking paths and eventually community classrooms and labs. Lily had insisted on one thing. Every kid who steps foot here should feel like they already belong. We walked the perimeter, boots crunching on gravel. The architect had spray-painted outlines for the entrance, the reception area, the big conference room with a glass wall that would face the woods. I wanted to feel open, she said. No locked doors unless absolutely necessary. No corner offices, no intimidation. You mean like a startup with actual values? Exactly, she grinned. We paused at a spot marked garden. She'd planned a reflection space there, a simple bench under a curved pergola with vines, somewhere people could breathe. You know, I said, slipping my hand into hers, they took me out of their will. She glanced at me. I know, and yet, I've never felt richer. She smiled. Maybe it's not about what you inherit. Maybe it's about what you plant. I looked around. Steel, mud, dust. But I saw it too, what she was planting. You made me stronger, I said quietly. Stronger than I ever was before. She tilted her head. I didn't do anything you couldn't have done. No, I said. You just showed me it was possible. Later that night, I sat alone in my office, rereading the letter from my mother. It still caught me off guard, not because it was flawless, but because it wasn't. It wasn't polished or perfect. It was just real. And maybe for the first time, she wasn't trying to control the story. She was just owning her part in it. That to me meant more than any check, any apology soaked in pity. It meant she saw us, not as rebels, not as disappointments, not as kids who needed to come crawling back, but as people. Adults, builders, they erased me from their will. But Lily, she made me a man who didn't need it. I didn't need their will. I had her. And that was more than enough.